Hey guys, welcome back to MATHit School. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how I solve these quadratic equations with a coefficient of x squared equal to 1 by the method of factoring. I'm going to be solving around 12 quadratic equations with 1x squared in it, so stay tuned if you would like to find out how to solve these problems correctly. Now, in short, what you would do is when you see a quadratic equation like this, you would try to come up with two numbers that when multiplied together gives me AB, or this C part, and when added together gives me A plus B, which is this B part. So without further ado, let me just show you by solving the actual problem. So before dealing with quadratic equations, let's take a look at these. Now I have these two binomials, and if those two binomials, when they are multiplied together, gives me 0, then it means it's either x plus 1 is equal to 0 or x plus 3 is equal to 0 in order to give me 0, right? So if x plus 1 is equal to 0, then it means our x is equal to -1. And if our x plus 3 is equal to 0, that means our x is equal to -3. So those are our x values, and this is how you would get the values of x from multiplication of two binomials like these. So moving on to the second one, it's either x minus 2 is equal to 0 or x minus 1 is equal to 0. And if x minus 2 is equal to 0, that means our x is equal to 2. And if our x minus 1 is equal to 0, that means our x is equal to 1. And this is how you would derive two x values from these expressions. Next, if we have x times x minus 3 is equal to 0, that means it's either our x is equal to 0 or x minus 3 is equal to 0. So it's either our x is equal to 0 or our x minus 3 is equal to 0, leading us to think that our x is equal to 3. So these two values are our answers to this third problem. And moving on, if we have x minus 4 squared is equal to 0, that simply means our x minus 4 should be equal to 0, meaning our x should equal to 4. So that'll be our solution to this last problem on this page. Now I went over this page in order to give you guys advanced footing per se before solving actual quadratic equations. So let's go ahead and solve these quadratic equations. Now these quadratic equations all have coefficient of 1 for x squared, meaning you don't have to worry about the first variable. You just write two x's underneath and write two boxes underneath the third variable or third term, so that we can come up with two numbers that when multiplied together gives me 2, but when added together gives me 3. So what are those two numbers? Well, 2 is a prime number, so it has only two factors, 1 and 2. And what about the signs? It's either +1 and +2 to give me +2 when multiplied together, or it's either -1 and -2 in order to give me +2 when multiplied together. But -1 plus -2 gives me -3, which means those are not it. So it's going to be +1 and +2 within the boxes, so that when multiplied together, it does give me +2, and when added together, it does give me 3. Okay, so my boxes are confirmed, so I'm gonna draw another rectangular box like these so that I can come up with two binomials First one will be x plus 1, and second one will be x plus 2. And I'm going to put parentheses around those two binomials, have them multiplied to each other, and set it equal to 0, which means if x plus 1 times x plus 2 is equal to 0, it's either x plus 1 is 0 or x plus 2 is 0. And if x plus 1 is equal to 0, our x should be equal to negative 1. And if our x plus 2 is equal to 0, then our x should be equal to negative 2. And that's how I would derive two solutions or two values of x from this quadratic equation by factoring. So that's my final answer, and I'm gonna repeat the same process for the second quadratic equation. Now I'm gonna write two x's. I'm not gonna worry about the first term because the coefficient is indeed equal to 1. So I'm just gonna write two x's there, and I'm gonna write two boxes and try to come up with two numbers that when multiplied together gives me positive 2, and when added together gives me negative 3. It's this number and this number. So what are those two numbers? Again, 2 is a prime number, so it only has two factors, 1 and 2. And since when added together it should give me negative 3, I'm going to add negative signs to both numbers. That way, if I multiply negative 1 and negative 2 together, it gives me positive 2. And when I add negative 1 and negative 2 together, I get negative 3. So the values are confirmed. I'm going to make two rectangular boxes like these to come up with two binomials. One is x minus 1. Second one is x minus 2. And when multiplied together, it gives me 0. Meaning, it's either x minus 1 is equal to 0 or x minus 2 is equal to 0. So if x minus 1 is equal to 0, that means our x should be equal to 1. And if our x minus 2 is equal to 0, then our x should be equal to 2. And those are our x values that we got from factoring from this third equation. Let's move on to the third quadratic equation and repeat the same procedure. Write two x's, two boxes, come up with two numbers that when multiplied gives me negative 2, this number, but when added gives me positive 1, this number. All right, so what are those two numbers? Again, minus 2. It has only two factors, 1 and 2, and one of it should have negative sign because when multiplied together, it gave me negative 2. So let's look at this number. When added together, it's giving me positive 1, so it's the smaller number that should have negative sign. So it's negative 1 and positive 2. They do give me negative 2 when multiplied together, and when added together, they do give me positive 1 back. So my numbers are confirmed. I'm going to draw two rectangles to form two binomials. One is x minus 1. Second one is x plus 2, and that's equal to 0, meaning either our x minus 1 is equal to 0, leading us to think our x is equal to positive 1, or the second binomial, x plus 2 is equal to 0, leading us to think our x should be equal to negative 2. So these two numbers, 1 and negative 2, should be our solutions to this third quadratic equation. Now let's continue solving more problems. Because practice makes perfect, you can pause the video and try to solve it yourselves first, and then come up with answers yourselves so that you can test yourselves how well you do. Meanwhile, I'm just gonna continue on solving. two numbers that when multiplied gives me -2, when added gives me -1. So those are gonna be 2, 1 with negative sign on one of it, on bigger number, because it should add to give me -1. So it means x minus 2 times x plus 1 is equal to 0. X minus 2 is equal to 0, or x plus 1 is equal to 0. So our x is either 2 or -1. Moving on, two x's with two boxes, and two numbers should multiply to give me 4 and add to give me 4. Very easy, 2 and 2. Now that means x plus 2 times x plus 2 is equal to 0, or x plus 2 squared is equal to 0, meaning x plus 2 should be equal to 0, and our x should be equal to -2. Alright, two x's with two boxes. So two numbers that when multiplied gives me +4, but when added gives me -4. So 2 and 2 with negative signs on both of them. So that -2 times -2 gives me +4. -2 plus -2 gives me -4. So my binomials will be x minus 2 times x minus 2 is equal to 0, or x minus 2 squared is equal to 0, which means our x minus 2 should equal to 0, meaning our x should equal to 2. Alright, moving on. Let's continue on with the same exact method. I'm gonna come up with two numbers that when multiplied gives me 5, but when added gives me -6. So how about 1 and 5 with negative sign on both of them? Okay, so x minus 1 times x minus 5 is equal to 0, meaning x minus 1 is equal to 0, or x minus 5 is equal to 0. And our x should be 1, and our x should be 5. Alright, moving on, two numbers, two x's, and I'm going to come up with two numbers that when multiplied together gives me +7, but when added together gives me -8. Simple, 1 and 7 with negative sign on both of them. So it means x minus 1 times x minus 7, these two binomials, they should multiply to give me 0, meaning that it's either x minus 1 is equal to 0 or x minus 7 is equal to 0. So our x is 1 or x is 7. Last on this page, write two x's and draw two boxes where two numbers will multiply to give me -11, but when added will give me +10. So what will those numbers be? Well, 11 is a prime number and it's got only two factors. So 11 and 1 will be, and they should add to give me 10, so why don't I add negative sign on 1? Alright, 11 times -1 does give me -11 back. 11 plus -1 does give me +10 back. So those numbers are confirmed. I have x plus 11 times x minus 1. Those are this number and this number. And they are equal to each other, meaning x plus 11 is equal to 0, or x minus 1 is equal to 0. Now let's move that a little bit to the right. Now this means our x is equal to -11, and this means our x is equal to 1. And these are going to be our solutions to this third problem on this page. Now I have just 3 more questions to go. Let's go ahead and solve these. 2 boxes. 2 numbers that when multiplied gives me -6, but when added gives me -1 because it's -1 here. So those are going to be not 1, 6, but 2, 3 with negative on 3. So 2 times -3 does give me -6. 2 plus -3 does give me -1. Alright, so the first binomial will be x plus 2. Second binomial, x minus 3. And when multiplied together, they give me 0, meaning it's either x plus 2 is 0 or x minus 3 is 0. So our x is either -2 or +3. Alright, moving on. I have 2 x's here, 2 boxes here, 2 numbers that when multiplied gives me -15, but adds to give me +2. So it'll be something like 3 and 5 with negative on the smaller number. And when I check back those numbers, -3 times 5 does give me -15. -3 plus +5 does give me +2. So the numbers do check out. So let's circle them together. First binomial, x minus 3. Second binomial is x plus 5. And multiplied together, they give me 0, meaning our x minus 3 is equal to 0. It's either x minus 3 is equal to 0, leading us to think that our x is 3, or x plus 5 is equal to 0, leading us to think our x is equal to -5. So those two will be our solutions to this problem. Moving on to our very last problem of the day, I have 2 x's and 2 boxes as usual. I'm going to have to come up with 2 numbers that when multiplied gives me +14, but when added gives me 9. So 1 and 14 is not going to work. How about 2 and 7? Well, 2 and 7 when multiplied together does give me +14, but when added together it gives me +9. So let's add negative signs to both of them. -2 times -7 does give me 14, but -2 plus -7 does give me -9. So those numbers are confirmed. My first binomial will be x minus 2. Second binomial, x minus 7. Meaning our x will equal to, it's either x minus 2 is equal to 0 or x minus 7 is equal to 0, meaning our x is equal to 2 or x is equal to 7. And those two are our values for x for this last quadratic equation. Now I have quadratic equations that are slightly more difficult to solve in these pages where the coefficients for x squared is greater than 1. Where factoring is going to be a bit more complicated, but that's for another video, which I'm going to post in a few days. So wait for those videos. And thanks for watching. I'll come back with other contents.